Welcome, everyone. I'm Lee Nadler, founder of Sherpa Marketing and chairman of the board for the Advertising Club of New York. For those of you who are familiar, this series features our board members for a candid and personal discussion about these extraordinary times. The Advertising Club has always been committed to keeping us connected, and now it's even more important. I hope you've tuned into some of the other programs inside the Ad Club's virtual clubhouse. Last week's conversation with Sandra Sims Williams, the Senior Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for Nielsen, is now posted, and I encourage you to watch that along with several other discussions that we've had in the past several weeks. We hope these conversations are helpful for you as we plan to move forward together, and that you recognize that the Ad Club, your club, is here for you. Today, I'm very excited to have another conversation with another fellow Advertising Club board member, Mike Sellette. Mike is the head of media at Nestle Waters North America. He oversees media planning, investment, and measurement for several brands that you're going to hear about, and we're going to get to some specifics of programs that the company has had to do in record time, and that hopefully will teach you, while you might be in a different category, some of the ways that you can maneuver and pivot to move your brands and your business forward. Prior to Mike joining Nestle, he's had an amazing career on the media side as well, including leading worldwide marketing for Amazon's advertising, including programmatic brand strategy and sponsorships. Mike, thanks for joining today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all that you're doing to keep our club and the community connected during these real crazy times.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, as you know, we've structured these conversations into a couple of different areas. The first is how the company is pivoting. The second, how you're changing things with the teams internally, again, that all of us can learn from. We're all going through this work from home and different initiatives that have to be launched. And I will just say, from an aside, while we certainly have limited any commuting time, I'm hearing from more and more people how, it's nonstop amount of work with all the changes that are going on. So it'll be interesting to hear from you of how your teams are doing things differently. And then finally, just for all of us, as we look at our careers, what kind of advice can we share about moving forward in our careers and continuing to think about what's important, to us as individuals and also as business people. So let's start out. Let's talk about some of the ways that Nestle Waters, under your responsibility for media, had to make some very sudden shifts. And in our conversation preparation, again, every conversation is different. As you know, we've had our board members from American Express and Verizon and so forth, and everybody's products and services are different. But talk about how you as a company had to make some fundamental changes because of the ways that your products are able to get to market.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that first, and then we can talk about the teams and those pivots. So obviously back in March, a lot was still new and unfolding rapidly, but a couple of things happened pretty quickly for us where we needed to make changes. And, one of those actually, came more at the direction from some of our retail customers who said, there was, a huge demand surge for, key or essential products. Government guidance was to stock up or load the pantry for 14 days. That causes some supply chain disruption and some out of stock issues. As you can imagine, consumers, started to, voice their concerns and feedback about that, across categories. One of the things we did urgently was vet all of our active e-retail media and search, where many consumers were shopping, to determine if all of the advertising systems were in sync with the inventory management system. So in other words, if a product goes out of stock, does it automatically pause the advertising and stop bidding? And then on the flip side, when that product is replenished, does it relaunch the campaign? Once we got through that and we could verify that consumers were going to have a positive experience and only get directed to product that was in stock, we felt comfortable to keep moving. We kept some parts dark while those capabilities were still not yet at our standards. Also, I mean, during this time, it was really exciting for us to be promoting brands that, you know, typically are celebrating things like being together and having fine dining experiences or shared moments together on our, you know, balconies or in our parks. And for example, using S. Pellegrino, you know, they have a deep culinary community as well, and their creative message really highlights this moment of the beverage being shared, you know, in restaurants or in dining moments together. And these were not exactly the types of scenes that the public health officials wanted us to be promoting in general, right? The guidance was to socially distance and to avoid public spaces, right? And so
Yeah. So before you get into that example of how you pivoted, because I want to unpack this, because I think it's a fascinating thing that, again, you as overseeing media, right? And all of us at brands and agencies and media partners put things in place to, you know, make sure we're optimizing, and, you know, the KPIs are very different in let's say, times pre-COVID, where you're trying to generate demand and new purchase and repeat purchase and all kinds of things. You had to fundamentally shift to say, which stores even have the product, right? And how could we be putting demand generation messages out there when the people can't get the product? How did you create either those tools? How much of it was data driven, and how much was it, you know, buyers and your distribution partners kind of saying, hey, we have a problem here, and then you were able to turn off media? How did that process work? Because I think a lot of people can learn from that.
Yeah, I think the data sourced from multiple avenues, and you nailed it. I mean, some was coming through partners, retail customers, through our sales team. Others, you know, were, for example, listening through our consumer engagement services or social listening tools were indicating that consumers were struggling to find product that was in stock. So obviously all those things led us to mute or tone back or dial down some of the demand gen messaging. And, you know, at the time, you know, a brand like S. Pellegrino had, you know, quite a bit of TV on air. And so that was one where, you know, it's both the weight and the messaging itself that we wanted to pivot away from. And really quickly, our brand team was able to develop new creative assets that were going to tell a different story, which were really aligned with its authentic, you know, history of taking actions to support the culinary community. And they partnership with the James Beard Foundation. And what they did as restaurants closed or independent restaurants closed, they had developed a restaurant relief fund. And so the brand did two things. They made a donation of $1 million to support that fund. But then two is they repurposed their upfront television commitment, so national campaign, to help encourage others to take a look at this as a possible place for them to also follow suit and make donations if they were in a position to be able to. So I think that was really important, you know, for us to be able to find a win-win-win, supporting those restaurants aligned with the brand history, changing the creative message, and keeping some of those commitments to some of those broadcast partners.
That's really interesting. So again, on some of these conversations, a theme has arisen in terms of, first of all, let's take a drink of water. I need it for my throat, but you can get your brand plug in there. So go ahead.
Oh yeah, perfect. Wouldn't be an ad club event without a product placement. There you go. There's S. Pel Essenza.
I would say that's an assist right there. But in terms of hearing about these shifts, so not only did you have to shift where your media was running in terms of locations tied to your retailers, but then also the creative messaging shift. And obviously you had a partnership in place already with the James Beard Foundation, but I guess internally you go through the thought of what can we do ourselves to help, right? And the fact that you have a partner that you can then lean into. Talk about that process then in terms of, I guess, because you work on the media side, the creative was done through another team, but just talk about, and maybe this will lead into how teams can pivot. Like, did you guys work differently, or obviously you worked much more quickly, but did you work differently in terms of how to shift the message and lean into something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, the brand teams really have those relationships with those partners more directly, as well as with the creative agencies. So they were able to move very quickly in aligning that that was something that they wanted to support, and they were able to make some of those creative changes very quickly. Certainly, I think the way of working was disrupted in how we engage with them too. I mean, we had to be talking in a very frequent way, and oftentimes that was on text or on cell phone, through all hours of the day, but also over the weekends. We have a really excellent couple of agencies who are specifically working on SPEL, both, Ogilvy on the creative side and then Open Mind on the media side, who are able to also help facilitate more frequent communication on things like what the deadlines would be for clearance and for trafficking, trying to push back on extensions. So bringing those partners into the discussion and making sure that all stakeholders are communicating more frequently, was really, really essential for us to be able to make those pivots and, keep the inventory running with this new message only and not the old messaging. Yeah.
Very interesting and different approval process. And was there also, and again, we're kind of in that area of like the teams reworking a little bit, but you mentioned the decision-making and text and so forth. I've worked in a big company and understand like even though it's not intended, there are silos set up, right? It's just the way it is, even within an agency or a company or any group. Did you see some of those silos break down, and did you see people taking on roles maybe differently than they had, again, pre-COVID, that maybe will last going forward, or showed you a kind of a new process for going forward more efficiently and effectively?
Yeah, so a great question. Certainly the disruption brought about those more fluid conduits of communication between typical silos, like you mentioned. I think we quickly moved into, the day we knew we had to make some pauses and shifts, I think it was, March 15th or 16th. We immediately implemented standing daily media status calls. We had a couple of them, some with the media agency partners, some with our internal executive marketing leadership team. So we knew that we had these touch points to always connect on things. We also just got in the cadence of sending out updates in real time to the stakeholder groups, as well as sending out, kind of links to an action tracker. So we said, these are all the things that we must do in terms of media shifts or pivots, assigning clear owners, due dates, deadlines, and just making sure that everyone had access to that central list of activity that was going on. We quickly provided a status sheet of all media, where it was, if it was live or if it was paused. We brought in other teams that we don't typically have accountability for their investment activity. For instance, the shopper marketing teams, they're more and more using some of the main media publishing partners that typically fall into the realm of the media agencies or the marketing teams. And so it was really important that we all showed up as one Nestle to the consumers and to the retail customers. So absolutely making sure everyone has transparency and access to those tools and knows that they can get to these, standing status calls, was really, really an important way to make sure everybody was moving in the same direction during this time.
Yeah, that's important for everybody. Again, I want to share and tease this out because, there's an inherent kind of risk in obviously moving quickly, and I think inherently, every company is different and their agency relationships are different in terms of risk and approvals and process and the time it takes and so forth. And as you and I talked about in the prep call, I want to share this with the group. You and I have both worked on different, let's say, large scale initiatives. I've orchestrated a Super Bowl campaign for Mini Cooper or an Olympic effort. And you tend to set up kind of a planning structure for that. That's very different than your normal, product launch or seasonality effort or something. And some people call that a war room, right? When we were talking in prep, you kind of brought up that war room mentality. Do you want to just explain that a little bit? And again, for people listening, how can they set up these structures differently to move forward fast, understand risk, get everybody in the right place, and then be able to make some smart, creative decisions and basically take action fast.
Right. Yeah, I think, a couple of thoughts come to mind. I mean, we felt that over communication and having these, standing touch points and central places to store data that were frequently updated, that transparency were really kind of the hallmarks of what would enable us all to move the whole business forward. And I think, number two is we have really excellent strength in our agency partnerships. And I think that's something that's unique is they're not the conventional vendors in some, teams. They're really a core part of who we are. And I think there's a lot of transparency in the ways of working together. And I think we years ago took the mindset shift that we were going to break from that kind of hierarchical approach and make things more equitable and bring not just planners directly together with brand teams and bring them more into integrated agency planning discussions with the creative and search and all the other stakeholders, for instance, but also bring the investment leads in so everybody's hearing the information in real time at the same time. And as more things have become sophisticated or fragmented in the industry, I think it's more important that we get all of that data together at the same time. So I think those, were really, really key elements of us being able to move quickly. I think, another good example of, structural changes that we made in place during this time was, once we felt that collectively things were stabilizing enough that we could return to messaging that would be generating demand, it was coming out of a period of months of being dark. We needed to plan for the second half of the year and start driving growth and for driving volume again to make up for lost time. And using some of these same structures that were put in place during the crisis management period, for instance, the standing daily calls, we aligned on, okay, what are the brands that we're going to be focused on that meet, the supply requirements that are, in the right places for distribution, that have the assets that are available. Once we got through that, we quickly moved everybody through an understanding of what the media briefing and planning process is. Kicked off everybody running through the media brief where they have to align with certain stakeholders. We gave very clear deadlines and worked backwards from what are the dates that you could be back on air or back online. And that really helped us, again, using status trackers to keep all the portfolio together. And so our agency team, Open Mind, did a land speed record here in basically going from brief to plan in 8 days for 8 different brands, when in a normal operating environment, we might like to see about 6 to 8 weeks to get that much amount of work done with deep strategic planning. But, using good judgment, keeping everybody informed, working against these project timelines, getting everybody to come to these types of Zoom meetings, going through those project plan milestones was really, really an important way for us to move that fast and to be able to get the alignment on those plans.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, speaking of data, which I want to unpack for a second, we're going to launch a poll for all those participants on there. And it really is kind of getting into some of the things about moving forward and working from home and going back to the office and so forth. So you should see that poll now launched. If all of you can answer the questions and then hit submit. And in a couple minutes, we'll share the results, but we'll keep our conversations going as well. So just if those of you on the other side of this can just look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a poll that you can launch, or if it's not popped up already. So in terms of the data that you mentioned, did you have to create any new data sets or any new places from which to get data, other than the supply chain that you mentioned, which I assume is just something maybe new to your group, but are there any new forms of data or new KPIs that you've been putting in place that you want to measure and track?
I think one of the things that our team started to think about when we were moving into the second half planning was not just thinking about what's happened and what's happening in the moment, but thinking about the future time in which, the messaging exposure would occur. So again, really excellent planning team at Open Mind was able to call out things such as, hey, these are some consumer trends that we're seeing now that we believe will continue to be sticky, such as, the rise of streaming, both video and audio. We should really be cognizant of that. We had done a little bit of testing into the space in 2019, so we had some data there to look at. We also had some data from other sister or sibling brands across the Nestle portfolio to leverage, but really pulling in some third-party research was important to understand where these trends going to continue or be further accelerated. So that way they go through the planning process and we get the alignment and bring all the stakeholders along on that journey in this moment, but not for advertising that's going to appear for several months from now. So I think those were really important trends for us to also think about. The election coming up was not anything anybody was really focused on in our world in this particular moment. Last month, it was, let's just get through day by day, but bringing forward, the impact that they've seen on campaigns from election advertising, thinking through what the increase in TV ads might be because there's going to be a lack of rallies coming up in general. So I think those were some really helpful insights that helped us move forward. And that's one of the areas where I think we're still really welcome and open to hearing from our partners and researchers in the industry. Is just where are consumer trends going to be taking us and what should we be factoring into not only our media communication plans, but also the creative messaging that we're hoping to deliver to those stakeholders.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A couple of questions that have popped up in terms of, and you mentioned it also, and even looking at the upfront commitment that you had before. The industry, as you know, is looking at the upfronts perhaps a little differently, not just in terms of the lack of big celebratory presentations and all that comes with that, but also maybe about how purchasing is done differently and timing and so forth. What's your perspective on that as, again, maybe one of the things that helps the industry move forward in a different way that's been talked about, but now has a real momentum behind doing something different?
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is I think it is this disruption that's going to cause folks to reconsider the ways of working for decades now. And I know that we have some representation through the ANA. As you mentioned, a large number of advertisers are trying to address this with the community, and our agency partners are as well. I think, there's a strong need for people to have flexibility right now. And I think it's really difficult for, the business as usual expectation of making large commitments for, 9-12 months in advance. Right now, I just don't think that many clients or brand owners are in the position to be able to do that. So I think that's an important consideration. There's this other question about being able to switch from the broadcast to calendar year, and I'm not sure, what's going to happen there, but I certainly think from our perspective, that would be beneficial for many brand owners to pivot to that and also have that flexibility again. But, in general, we're planning for it, maybe at slightly different levels, but we've seen, some incredible value from it in terms of the volume and the positive impact it's made on our business. And so that's why I think, we'll continue to move forward with it, but maybe with some modifications.
Yeah. And one of the other things, as we talk about, kind of now getting into a bit of career advice and so forth, it's not just about the deal, is it? It's about those relationships and understanding where people are coming from and having a much more partnership approach, which I know is one of those buzzwords that everybody uses. But how do you see that partnership, relationship importance now during this time?
I think in general, we've been very fortunate to have strong partners. We, again, have this mindset of having a more equitable, level playing field or, more seats at the tables for decision making. And I think it's incumbent upon us to have a value exchange, in that relationship. And so, if we're requesting certain things from some of our partners, we like to know what is it that they want more of or that they need to know in the moment as well. And so, we've been able to make adjustments, whether it was replacing, let's say, bonus impressions that were run of site for, particular partner, and that's what they thought was valuable, but really didn't meet our standards and didn't even, meet that many human eyeballs. We were able to say, it's more important for us to reduce our non-working costs, and could you provide some of your excellent creative services? Or it's more important for us to have third-party measurement. Can we switch away from some of your, proprietary studies to independent research? Or if we're going to be asking for things, what can we do in advance? Could we have an executive come and speak internally to their sales team and talk about, a day in a life? So there's a lot of different ways to get creative in making sure there's some value exchange in the relationship. So that's, I think, the way we operate, and we'll continue to push on making sure that there's that inclusivity.
Nice. I think we're going to launch the results of the poll in a second, so just so everybody can see. So since working from home, do you feel the days go by fast? Is the overwhelming answer there. And when we return to the office, do you think everyone should be required to wear a mask? Yes. Once we return, would you feel more comfortable if we limited the number of people working in the office? Yes. You know, and something like that can obviously change the way teams work and so forth. And, you know, there are shifts that are going to happen. In some ways, it also allows you to, you know, not only have some of the benefits of spending more time with family and taking care of personal things, but it kind of also opens you up to a new set of talent, right? That might not live right at your headquarters or be willing to move or able to move or something like that. That I think companies have maybe forced themselves into a limit in the past, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think more people will be open to work from home resources supporting the business. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the last one is Zoom fatigue real. Overwhelmingly, yes. We don't have to dive into that so that we can actually end on time. We won't encourage more Zoom fatigue. But
as a foil to that, what I share is one of the things we've done with some of our folks, and this is something I learned at Amazon, was to be able to do a walk and talk. So to get away from the desk, to get outside to the extent that you're able to, and just talk on the phone and just do a walk around the block or wherever you can and do your 30 minutes that way together. No streaming, no FaceTime or anything like that. Just, I think, was a nice way to kind of refresh and give people a break. So we try to do that, or at least I try to do that once a week with folks as well.
Yeah, that's a nice example. I think also, you know, it's again, an overall statement, but I think there's a lot more humanity coming forth and now the way we work, and Sandra and others certainly talked about this in the previous conversations of just getting to know people a little differently. Like, we're in each other's homes right now, technically, right? And we might not have had discussions about things in the same way, or if, you know, someone's family member is coming into the room or whatever it is, it gives you another side of a person. Maybe, you know, you can talk about that from two perspectives. One, from your team perspective and how that's helping to build deeper relationships and alliances. And then also, I know you had one other example that really took a very human approach for the Nestle Pure Life in terms of the creative shift and program that you were able to really make a difference with.
Yeah, absolutely. If we can start with that. I mean, I think, you know, similarly, we were in a position where, just going back, you know, we had to repurpose some of our inventory, but also I think at that time, you know, there was a lot of data coming out about the impact of these shutdowns. And one of the areas that was really hit hard with the school closures were families that depended on meals coming out of the schools. And that's not something that I think, you know, we might all immediately think about, but to assist those families with children who lost access to those healthy choices, and Nestle, you know, is strongly aligned with, you know, healthy food and beverage choices, decided not only to make $1 million donation to a long-standing partner, No Kid Hungry, but, you know, the Nestle Pure Life team also redeveloped a creative asset with WWE star Titus O'Neil, who has a personal story around food insecurity as well. And they helped raise awareness about a meal finder website, which the team also helped contribute resources to build, that enables people to find meals and those hours of service in which they could go to those local community locations to pick up food for their families that were no longer able to get it from the schools that they had depended on before the closure. So, you know, a big part of what, you know, drives the teams to operate with speed and to find solutions and to extend that purpose through all of the partners in the ecosystem, I think was something that brought us all together for sure too. But, you know, even just like you said, on a more basic team level, I think, you know, we do things like they seem subtle and nuanced, but I think they're important to have some continuity around, but some rituals and starting meetings and asking people how they're doing, and sharing a coffee together, or sharing jokes about what hot shows they're catching up on over the weekends, but also just to ask what do you need most, to kind of take a step back from what it is that you're trying to achieve, whatever deliverable you think you need to execute against, but just to ask each person, what do you need most now? And to take that more kind of service orientation to helping people through whatever obstacles or challenges they need. And sometimes the answers are more space, more personal time, or change in the communication, not just getting a signature or getting alignment on something. So I think that's really important. We take a step back and ask more questions like that too.
Yeah, that's great. And you're obviously very thoughtful about, you've mentioned it a few times, the relationships and how you look at partners and so forth. So I imagine there is more trust there. But certainly one of the things I've learned over my career, and then doing things about teamwork and leadership. And as you know, I've been to the Himalayas a couple times and learned from the Sherpa people, and have shared about that. And trust is just at the core, like especially during times where you're really in a potential situation where you may need help, and people are coming at this from very different points of view. I hope that people are able to take that forward. I hope that people are able to show a little bit of vulnerability and basically say, I need help, right? And I think we're in some ways brought up to show that we can like muscle through things, or I've got it. Like if I say I don't got it, then they're not gonna make me the team leader or whatever. But in some ways, I believe this. I don't know if you want to comment or we can move on, but I believe actually being honest with that kind of not only vulnerability, but also just acceptance of kind of what you have and how somebody else might be able to help you if you actually ask for it, how that can move the whole process forward faster, because none of us have all the capabilities inside of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it really well there, Lee, especially with the trust and empowering people, and then also just modeling the desired culture where there's trust, and being more open or candid in that communication is really important.
Yeah, cool. So we have about 10 minutes left. I appreciate those who submitted questions ahead of time, and I've seen a couple of new questions come in. So let's see how many of these we can get through quickly. Talk about new platforms. You did mention a little bit about kind of having to hone in on tried and true things, but is there still room for testing new things, and also tied to that, maybe, what's kind of the best way for the media partners who are on the phone to reach out and connect with the strategy team and others? You mentioned you're still open to ideas, but how much room is there for new ideas versus the tried and true?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's interesting when we've had major brand safety pauses in the past or other incidents. Oftentimes we did pivot quickly as well and found new solutions. Going back last year, we had some brand safety pauses, and instead of sitting on the money to wait for when we felt like things were safe enough for us to get back into that particular marketplace, we reallocated, and it was video investing. And for us, I think it was really exciting to be able to see video become more portable and more fluid across typical channels. And so we invested in connected TV, and we invested in some new video opportunities within the social partnerships and social channels. So video suddenly became even more holistic than we had envisioned it being initially. So I think there is an element, there is a bit of room for some risk taking. But yes, I mean, when we're moving this quickly to replan the second half of the year, and we have to go with some tried and true tactics that we have proven will drive towards our objectives, it might be a little bit harder to bring in, an entire new partner or an entire new channel through, let's say managed service or direct deals. But I think that there are some specific opportunities that are maybe a little bit easier. Programmatic is an area where it's also evolved, where the team, especially at Open Mind, has helped us, pioneer more into buying audio programmatically, buying connected TV programmatically. We're excited to see it maybe digital out of home, has more capabilities in this domain. There'll always be a place for managed service and direct, but we think this is an area where there's just a lot more room for experimentation and a lot more ability to test and learn quickly and then scale it out with a lot less kind of bureaucracy or a lot less hoops to go through in a typical planning process. So I think the partners that can bring forward really powerful data right now on audiences, on trends, I think every partner out there has really deep insights into who their audiences are. Definitely encourage using that as a way to start the conversation with us and the team at OpenMind. And also we have a team at Merkle who manages all of our search, e-retail and traditional, also very much open-minded to hearing all of those insights. And then I think when it comes to the actual execution or the capability of proposals, we really need to start with dessert first, or as we like to say, what those measurement, reports are going to look like, how often we're going to get that data, who's going to help us optimize it. And just, given how fast everybody's moving, we really would encourage people to lean in strong on the services. You mentioned before, the relationships are so important. Last year, we decided to test and learn with a new partner who wanted to deviate from the world of CPM and pay only on attention, high impact, highly curated inventory of partners for us to run these units against. And, we made sure there was a strong alignment that the leadership team of that company was really involved in making sure that it was not resource intensive, didn't have really lengthy creative lead times. If they could, put their creative resources to work, even better, but to really help us move more efficiently in that testing process and then commit to making sure that the campaigns were being optimized and that they remember this is an investment and we want to see really strong returns. Here are the benchmarks we expect you to exceed. And then when we saw those results, we celebrated those and they did, through third-party verification, beat our benchmarks. And that's the type of information we're able to share not only within our portfolio, but the broader, Nestle portfolio as well, too, for consideration for scaling those investments. It's really, really important to have, those audience insights, the capabilities to drive the performance, but to also provide the service that's going to make it a little bit more realistic to be able to execute, and your commitment to make sure that we're going to get that great set of results at the end.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of great nuggets in there, including, that's the 6th time, by the way, you mentioned OpenMind. So you're a great client. Give them shout outs, and I can't wait to meet them. I understand they'll become members soon. And I also understand, while you mentioned some of those KPIs, the programs that you mentioned earlier, that actually put some good into the world, like
Yes.
That's almost like I hate to break it into a term of added value, but it almost can be an added KPI now in terms of if you're actually doing good business and doing good in the world, how wonderful is that, for employee morale as well as actually helping people. And so, as through our board relationship on the Ad Club, even the media programs that we do through Media Action, where we're able to try a new media partner. So the media partner gets a new client, and we're putting money toward amazing programs that are helping to bring more equality into this advertising industry, which has certainly been a very important initiative for many years and is now finally getting the attention it deserves in terms of companies actually putting forth the metrics that they're going to use to actually make sure that we're delivering on these promises. The Ad Club is, as set up a foundation in 1986, donated over $10 million to date to try to improve not only the equality of new people coming in, but of actually people moving up in the industry as well. So I applaud you and the teams for doing great programs that can make a difference to your company, to the industry, and in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think to echo that, the Media Action program lead at the Ad Club and the foundation supports that provides so much growth in diversity and inclusivity in the industry is something really important for any of the publishers who are listening today to consider, being a part of and, taking that action that they can to support the broader shifts that we're seeing in our cultural moment. And for, any brand owners who are listening to actually consider making sure that some of that inventory that they're buying that's relevant for their particular business, they're probably buying through some of these networks and partners anyway, that it gets earmarked from that publisher to go into the foundation to drive more of the great growth and the talent that we all are looking for to help us build our brands and drive growth.
Nice. Yeah. I could go on with you for a long time. I do want to not increase Zoom fatigue for people though. I wanted to see if you had a quote that you wanted to share that's inspirational to you, maybe over the years or during these times, and if there's anything else you want to add.
Yes, thanks. So my quote is, in the spirit of us all wanting to take back some control and drive some growth and to be positive, is something that a very inspirational figure from my time at Amazon had shared when we were trying to quickly scale the advertising business there. And his name's Jeff Blackburn. He's a member of the S team, one of the longest serving members of that leadership group. And his quote was, double down on what's working and fix what's broken. And I think that's really important because we have a natural tendency to want to just focus on the problems or to solve, in the moment of crisis. But it's so important to also think about our strengths and the areas that are working, and to really double down in your investment, both personally and professionally, and with those resources that companies provide us to really drive growth and to get us back to a better place where I think many of us want to be than where we are right now.
That's very well said and very timely. I'm going to follow up your quote with a quote that's, I think, ties in a different way. The author of this quote is named Abraham Maslow. And he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail.
Very true.
I think you shared with us many ways of not only quote unquote pivoting, but actually looking at problems from a different perspective and trying to figure out what the right approaches are. And also being very open that everyone is not going to be quote unquote right or perfect, but you keep learning, you keep moving forward, you keep, working with your partners in ways that are really going to make them part of the team, and you will move forward and you'll move the business forward. And I'm just so glad that we're able to be on the Ad Club board together and help move this industry forward. So thank you, Mike, for joining us. And thank you all. Yep. Thank you all for tuning in. This is the Advertising Club's Conversation With series. In a minute, as we close, there'll be a quick survey. It'll take you less time than the poll to fill out, but it's important to us so that we can add additional speakers going forward and topics and so forth. Our next conversation with is 2 weeks from now on June 30th with Elizabeth Woodrum from JetBlue. So in a couple days, we will share this out for those of your colleagues maybe who didn't get to see it. Feel free to share, tag at AdClubNY, and everyone stay safe. We'll see you next time.